The rain had been falling for hours, washing away the dust of the small suburban town of Seattle, Washington. Inside a dimly lit cafe on the corner of Pine Street, a woman sat by the window, her trembling fingers wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee. Her name was Emily Carter, 34 years old, and a single mother for the past 4. She wore a simple cream sweater and a black scarf, her eyes carrying a heaviness that only those who had lost everything could understand. Every raindrop that slid down the glass reminded her of tears she had long stopped shedding in public. People around her saw a calm, graceful woman, but inside she was a storm trying hard not to destroy herself. Emily wasn't supposed to be there that evening. She had been driving home from work, lost in her thoughts, when the downpour forced her to pull over. The cafe was a small one, quiet and tucked away from the main road, just like her, trying to exist without being noticed. She had been abandoned by her partner Jason 4 years ago after a tragic fallout. He had been her college sweetheart, her best friend, her only love. Since then, life had been about surviving one day at a time for the sake of her 7-year-old son, Noah. Love to her was a closed chapter, something that belonged to another lifetime. As she sat there, her phone buzzed with a message from her friend Rachel, who had been begging her to try dating again. "Just one dinner," Rachel had said. "You can't live your whole life alone." Emily had laughed it off, but Rachel had secretly set up a blind date for her that evening. And when Emily finally saw the message, she realized the man was supposed to meet her here in this very cafe. Her instinct told her to leave. But before she could, the bell over the door chimed softly. A tall man in his late 30s stepped in, shaking the rain from his jacket. He looked around, his brown eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. Emily felt a strange flutter in her chest. There was something grounded and kind about him, something that didn't feel like the world she had known before. He walked toward her table, and for a moment she wanted to disappear, but then he smiled. That smile wasn't rehearsed or charming. It was real, warm, and patient. He introduced himself as David Reed. He was a civil engineer, newly moved to town, divorced 3 years ago, and raising a 10-year-old daughter named Mia. His voice was calm, and there was no rush in his word. No pressure. They talked about the weather, their kids, small things about work, and the quiet comfort of small towns. Emily found herself speaking more than she thought she would. She told him about Noah, about how hard it was raising him alone, about the stairs, and whispered pity that followed her everywhere she went. David listened quietly, his gaze never judging. When the waitress brought their food, Emily caught herself smiling for the first time in weeks. She almost felt guilty for it. How dare she smile when Jason wasn't here anymore, when she had promised to keep her heart locked away forever. But David didn't ask for that. He didn't dig into her past or offer hollow comfort. He just sat there present, listening, making her feel safe. After dinner, when David offered to walk her to her car, she hesitated. Rain still fell in soft sheets, the street lights glowing like stars reflected on wet asphalt. As they stood by her car, Emily took a deep breath and finally said what she had been holding in all night. "I need to tell you something," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm a single mother." For a long moment there was silence. The sound of rain filled the space between them. David looked at her, not with pity, not with surprise, but with quiet understanding. Then he smiled gently and said, "You don't mind that I'm divorced, right?" She shook her head. "Then why would I mind that you're a single mother?" He said softly. "I see a woman, not a title." Those words hit her harder than she expected. They weren't poetic. They were simple, honest. And for the first time in years, Emily felt something break open inside her. A part of her heart that had been frozen since the day Jason left. She didn't know it then, but that rainy night was the beginning of a new season in her life, one that would test her courage to love again. Over the next few weeks, David and Emily began meeting casually. Coffee after work, walks in the park with their kids, simple things that slowly built a bridge between their worlds. Noah and Mia became inseparable, laughing and playing like siblings. David would sometimes fix small things around Emily's house, a leaking pipe, a squeaky door, never expecting anything in return. His presence became a quiet comfort, something she looked forward to. But healing wasn't linear. There were nights when Emily would wake up crying, still calling out Jason's name. There were days when she'd cancel plans with David, terrified of betraying her past. She carried guilt like an anchor, and no matter how kind David was, she felt she didn't deserve happiness again. One afternoon, she confessed it all to him. They were sitting on a park bench, watching the kids play. "I can't promise I'll ever stop missing him," she said. David looked at her, his eyes filled with gentleness. "Then don't," he said. "Love doesn't erase love. Emily, it adds to it. Maybe the heart isn't a room with one key. Maybe it's a home that can grow." Those words changed something deep inside her. Slowly, she began to understand that letting love in again didn't mean she was forgetting Jason. It meant she was honoring the life he wanted her to live. As months passed, their friendship deepened into something neither of them tried to label. There were no grand confessions, no promises, just quiet understanding. One evening, David invited Emily and Noah over for dinner. Mia had made decorations, and David had cooked spaghetti. The only dish he claimed he could make without burning. It was messy, loud, and imperfect, but it felt like family. When Emily looked around the table, watching Noah laugh with Mia and David pretending to act offended at their jokes, she felt warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in 4 years, she didn't feel alone. Yet, the world wasn't always kind. When people in town began whispering that she was moving on too fast or disrespecting her past with Jason, Emily broke down again. One Sunday after church, an old neighbor approached her and said, "It must be nice to forget so easily." That night, Emily sat on her porch, tears streaming down her face. David came over without asking questions. He just sat beside her, silent, holding her hand. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," he said softly. "You've loved deeply, lost deeply, and yet you're still standing. That's not betrayal, that's bravery." It wasn't an instant fix, but it gave her strength to rise again. She learned to tune out the noise, to focus on the quiet truth of her own heart. Slowly, she began volunteering at the community center, helping other single mothers and single parents rebuild their lives. David supported her every step of the way, not as a savior, but as someone who believed in her, even when she didn't. A year later, David invited her to the same cafe where they had met. The rain was falling again, just like that first night. As they sat by the window, David placed a small velvet box on the table. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling just a little, "I know you've been through more than anyone should ever have to face. I know love for you isn't something simple or new, but I also know that life rarely gives us second chances, and if it does, we shouldn't be afraid to take them." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as he opened the box. Inside was a silver ring, simple yet elegant, with a small sapphire stone that shimmered like raindrops. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "You don't have to answer now," David said quickly, his voice full of care. "Just know that I'm here. Whether it's today, tomorrow, or years from now, I'll still see you as the woman who found courage when life gave her every reason to give up." Emily looked into his eyes, and all the pain, fear, and loneliness she had carried began to dissolve. She took a shaky breath and whispered, "Jason used to tell me that love never dies. It just finds new ways to stay alive. Maybe this is love finding me again." And as the rain fell outside, she nodded through her tears. "Yes, David," she said softly. "I think I'm ready." They didn't need applause or celebration. Their love wasn't about fireworks. It was about healing, quiet resilience, and two broken souls who found light in each other's darkness. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to help us spread messages of hope, healing, and second chances. Because love, real love, isn't about perfect beginnings. It's about brave hearts who choose to believe again. Speech Balloon's special request. Tell us in the comments, do you believe that love can return after loss? Your words might give someone the courage to start again. And somewhere beyond the rain and the pain, two souls found peace. Proof that even after the hardest goodbyes, life can still whisper, it's okay to love again.